Good morning. I'm Melynda. Welcome to the first panel of the summit. We have a great slate of panelists, so let me introduce them. First, we have John Conway, General Group Manager of New Media at the Capital Broadcasting Company. We have Nick Johnson, Head of Advertising at McClatchy, and Eli Lippman, Director of Celebrity Entertainment at AMI. So please welcome our panelists. So first up, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little about yourself and what your main focus is right now, and maybe if you could tell us a little bit about how your model is structured.
So Capital Broadcasting Company is a private family-owned company about an hour north of here, and obviously started in broadcasting, radio, then TV, but then branched out into digital. So I manage the New Media Group, which has about 55 people in it, concentrating primarily on a group of websites and apps, including OTT apps, now getting into podcasting. And so, when we used to have a financial presentation for our CFO, we would show our revenue streams, and it would basically be a pie chart with 3 slices. And now when we show that pie chart, it's probably about 15 slices, which is a reflection of how much more complicated our business has become, the fact that we have had to diversify our revenue streams, both in terms of where we think markets are headed, but also opportunities. And so, we're now into things that many companies are doing, that you saw on some of the previous slides, events becoming an area of opportunity for us. In fact, this Saturday we're hosting a high school honors event for about 350 people to honor local high school athletes. That's become a 6-figure opportunity for us. And so events, podcasting, OTT, we have become diversified over time, and expect that trend to only continue.
So I'm Nick Johnson. I oversee advertising sales at McClatchy. McClatchy is a 164-year-old newspaper company. We have about 30 newspapers across the country. We are about 12 months old in our digital initiatives, so we're catching up for lost time in a lot of ways. Really, my focus has been how do you take 30 businesses and integrate them into one holistic one? How do we leverage the scale of 30 newspapers and bring them together as one large audience? As of 9 months ago, we never really had anybody focusing on calling on national advertisers in New York, for example. So we're standing up a lot of different businesses as we speak. Some are very fundamentally basic digital businesses. We're reconstructing our sales organization to be more strategic and lean. Rather than having 30 different sales forces across the country, we've organized them into channels. And we're thinking about how do we evolve digital as quickly as we can to be a digital-first company moving forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Eli. I head up the digital group at American Media. AMI is the publisher of everyone's favorite celebrity magazines, Us Weekly, In Touch, Life and Style, OK, Star, Radar Online, and of course our men's group of Men's Journal, Muscle and Fitness, and Flex magazines. My role at the company is really on a high level to ensure that our operation turns on and works properly every single day. I work across all different departments. As many of our partners in this room know, I'm very hands-on, product, edit, and revenue side. Ensuring that editorial has what they need to show success in terms of data, what's working, working with revenue to understand packages that we should be bringing to market, understand what is best in class to our advertisers and what we actually can fill. And of course, working with product to ensure that we check all the boxes and are playing nice with the tech partners, many in this room, other the big dogs, Google, Facebook, because their opinion does matter now, and ensuring that we play nice with them. And the second question, a little bit about our model. Our model is very standard to a lot of the publishers in the digital space now, where we drive traffic. Traffic is the lifeblood of our business. And then we service the traffic with banners, boxes, pre-roll, branded content for CPM or CPC deals.
I know I speak for every man in this audience when we say, can we get a comp of Flex magazine? Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty awesome.
Really? Everybody in here? I don't know. No problem, no problem.
I was wondering if within your structures, if you could talk a little bit about where you're seeing the most surprising movement. Like what has kind of caught you by surprise?
I can go. One of the things I would say is when I got to McClatchy, one of the things that interested me the most from the outside looking in was Accelerate. We have, I basically call it like a Mighty Hive light. So really focused on bringing full agency solutions to small, mid-sized advertisers. I was really stoked about the work they were putting out, and I thought that this would really be an interesting differentiator. At the same time, there was a lot of talk about one team at our company. And like within 30 days, I was like, there's like 8 teams at this company. And so to me, what I realized was we had this really bright, shiny object that was sort of established on its own as an independent sort of startup within the company with its own identity. And that was doing a few great things. They were having a lot of success, but it was also creating a significant amount or a fair amount of sort of ill will within the company. So you had people that wanted to replicate that capability and were building it on their own. And in an environment where expenses are super tight, I mean, the newspaper industry obviously is not the most healthy segment of the media business out there. We had to find a way to really pull that back in. And so as I sort of reorged the company, one of the fundamental things we had to do was to pull Accelerate back in. At its core, it was an agency, but it became this holding group for everything digital. And in many ways, there's still ops sits in there, fulfillment. There's a lot that sits in there that probably shouldn't sit in there. So making them operate more as sort of a service provider within the company as opposed to this bright, shiny object with all this independence. And now working to have the rest of the sales organization lead into them for that core proposition has been really important and a lot of work. But to me, that was very surprising because it was a really well-led, smart, strategic group that was kind of hurting itself in its independence, and we had to find a way to rein that back in.
Yeah. I think a big surprise internally is how siloed a lot of the departments stay, and how part of my job and my responsibility is to really break that down. And I would imagine that's very similar in a lot of publishers is revenue having their job and their responsibility and not necessarily understanding the tasks or the hurdles for, call it product or call it editorial. And so it's really part of my job specifically, but also a lot of the vendors and a lot of the partners that we have to really help break down those because the synergy has to happen, otherwise we all fail.
Obviously, there's a lot of interest in podcasting and OTT right now, and I think we approached that initially like a lot of legacy companies do, thinking, oh, we'll monetize this with spots, with advertising, with pre-roll. And we are quickly finding that is not going to be a successful model, not for us at least. We don't have the scale to do that. In fact, I mean, a successful podcast needs 50,000 regular downloads, and there is such a small percentage of the wide universe of podcasts that ever get that amount. So we're really looking at them as opportunities for branded content, working with advertising clients to develop more content on these platforms where there's less concern necessarily about the number of downloads and more about the association with the brand.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about within those changes, how do you make sure, because you said that part of your job is to make sure that everybody has what they need as they're working in their job. So I'm curious, how do you make sure as structures are changing so quickly that you have a strategy that works and that everything is covered the way that it needs to be?
I'll start out. I think we probably have the smallest challenge of the panelists represented here just because of the scale and size of our group. It's obviously much easier when all of your employees are contained in one location to be on top of that, and then also, more importantly, to get that information out. So I think, obviously it is always a challenge to make sure have a well-trained sales force, especially with as many different products as we ask them to sell. So that is still a challenge for us, even as a small group. And so, that's an area that we continue to focus on, but I think we have it probably easier than many people.
So for us, as I mentioned, over the last 18 months, we basically have really reinvented the company a couple times. We went from 30 publishers that all had span of control over their own market. They were essentially the president of their newspaper and were graded really on OCF. And so 18 months ago, you had 30 people doing things. Their performance was evaluated on operating cash flow, but there was no sort of strategy to make sure people were doing the same thing. So your sales team may be impacted in one reason, your editorial team may be impacted in one area. It became a very sort of inefficient way to run the business. as I was onboarding the company, we were moving from 30 to 4 regional publishers that basically had 8 to 10 newspaper span of control. But that was really just an organizing function for leadership. We really never got at the root cause. As we've moved into what we call our channel structure, we have what I like to call the one throat to choke strategy for each sort of line of business, and they all roll into me. And so what that's done is, we've uncovered is that we knew it was pretty messy sort of at the end points, but there was really no way to get at it, and now we have a mechanism to get at it. So if you're running our strategic sales team, which is our biggest revenue driver in the company, now there's a way to evaluate talent consistently. We can make sure everybody's compensated the same way. We can make sure that everybody has one set of priorities rather than priorities that are dictated by a publisher in Macon because we got a 5-day mushroom festival that we got to go sell for $1,000. Now we're like, that's a real thing still. Believe me, I couldn't believe I got the phone call. It was awesome. And so I was like, I used to go to the Olympics. That was awesome. Now I'm dealing with a mushroom festival. I don't even think I get comped at the mushroom festival, which is kind of a problem for me. But it's allowed us to get to the root cause of some of these problems and having one sort of central owner, even though it's still a matrix organization, even though we still have regional publishers who run, who are still managing on an operating cash flow basis, we at least have sort of centralized that control and look top to bottom in the organization and start squeezing out any challenges or double down on opportunity. It also gives me the ability to flex resource across the organization rather than horse trading in the region. But also that ownership is sales, it's digital operations and fulfillment, it's legacy operation and fulfillment, and so as a result you have a leadership team that really touches everything that have gotten much closer and much more aligned very quickly. So that's how we're trying to get at it. I think though there's a lot of work to do because obviously when you're moving sort of through a transformation like this, you start exposing a lot of gaps in the process, and so I think our next 3 months or so we're kind of in the eye of the storm is figuring out where those gaps are, dealing with disruption. I mean, it's disruptive change. There's loss of control in some places. So you're managing some of that churn. But really, it was by driving accountability to the highest level we could get at in a structure where we know who owns what in a very matrix complex organization.
I think coming from a publisher that's existed for so many decades, it's about time that we have to adapt kind of a startup feel, a startup culture, and that's very difficult for a legacy brand or a legacy publishing house to take onto. But the guess and check system has to be alive. The digital environment is new, right? It's still new. And it's been decades now. We're still evolving and changing every day. So we need to have that structure in place and the ability to kind of test things, be okay if we fail, and reevaluate and come to the table. And so we're doing so. And I think many publishers of our size and larger than us are in the same boat where we need to kind of have that startup mentality.
So what are some of the biggest challenges facing your brands right now, and how are you using your new models to create solutions or tackle those?
Sure, I'll start. I think 2 years ago, if that question was asked, it would be, oh, our CPMs are falling, oh my God. And then last year, if you were to ask that question, it would be Facebook turned off all of our traffic, and how are we going to survive? And this year, it has to be internal, right? Our challenge is internal. It's how do we make our content work harder for ourselves? The new normal is the CPMs are where they're at. It's the platforms in which send us traffic, which again are the lifeblood. They've decided these are the levels that we're going to be at. And so now it's up to us to say, how do we take the content that we're creating and how do we make it work for us? Do we find syndication partners that will take our content and let them, right, have a rev share with us? Do we create content shorter or longer depending on a platform that may want it for a different size? Do we create a podcast studio of 13 original shows that are consumed, and although the volume is less than the page view count, the revenue potential is much higher? And so it's an internal struggle in which we have to look at our content creation, which is the crux of our business, and start saying, okay, instead of just putting it on our O&Os, what else can we do with this? And how do we succeed so that we offset either the traffic decline or the revenue decline?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really tough segment. I mean, and I kind of knew what I was getting into when I signed up to come to McClatchy. So I'm down for the challenge. But the reality is that the print business is is eroding very, very quickly. And I appreciated the slides earlier because it does seem that print is stabilizing, which gives us more runway. But at the end of the day, we have to pivot to becoming a digital company very, very quickly. And so while you can structure yourself and call yourself digital, you still have to make sure that you have sellers that understand it. And that's not easy. And also, we're not a company based in New York. I mean, I can throw a rock and hire 5 great digital sellers in New York tomorrow, but if I lose somebody in Sacramento, that's just not as easy, and there really is a local nature to our business that we have to remain focused on. We're offsetting that through Accelerate and by trying to build strong digital media services as an agency to small, mid-sized advertisers. That's a pretty good business. We've got a number of advertisers that are doing over $2 million with us a year. That's a good business. I'd love that business to scale. That offsets some of this print erosion. We've launched a national digital sales team. That's great, except many people, myself included, never knew what a McClatchy was before 9 months ago. So you walk into OMD or Essence or whoever to pitch McClatchy, and you have to start explaining what this brand is. It's a collection of newspapers. That's also not easy. So there's a lot of conversation about programmatic. You'll hear from Nick Ames tomorrow, who runs that business for us. And so, what we really did is we basically said, we've got to find a way to fill this bucket faster. This national digital sales team basically looked at open programmatic and said, we can create a better relationship to you, get to $1 much more quickly if you're a large retailer, if you're financial services, insurance. And that team's gone out and very quickly closed a number of private deals, which is helping us. At our core, though, we have to infuse digital everywhere. There's a lot of really good work that started before I got here. There's a huge commitment to training at McClatchy. That a lot of it was around sort of blocking and tackling, Salesforce management, pipeline management, et cetera. But now it's really becoming a center of excellence for training people on digital because Accelerate has a number of partnerships with people in this room and others. That's great to cut those partnerships, but if we're not in a position where our salespeople know how to sell them and are incented the right way to get out there and sell digital first, we have a lot of work to do. So we're working on all of that. For us, the key to us is how quickly do we make our entire sales force as digitally literate as we possibly can. The good news is between our strategic sales team and our local sales team, that's where the bulk of the revenue is, and so we can focus there. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
We also are investing in digital marketing services, the digital agency business, as a way to combat what we've seen in terms of the flattening of traditional digital advertising, and so the challenge for us in that space is that initially as we went into it, it's like we grabbed every dollar we could. However, you quickly realize the margins on products vary greatly inside the digital marketing realm, and so you don't want to be really putting all your eggs in a PPC type basket where your margins are going to be very slim. So one thing we've been working on with our team is to look at instituting minimums to make sure that we're protecting ourselves to not get upside down on some of these deals, and also to create incentives for the sales teams to sell our higher margin products where it makes sense. And to make sure everyone is aware of what our margins are on all these various products, because that is, that's key if you're going to be in this space. Just because it is complex, there's so many different pieces and elements that you're going to be asked to fulfill. The fulfillment pieces of it are very messy at times. Reporting is certainly a challenge to do it well. And so those are all things that we're constantly working on, as well as we hire and try to find people to come on board as part of our digital agencies, to find people from agency backgrounds. We started out with people who didn't have agency backgrounds and quickly realized we were going to be much better off to bring in people who were much more familiar with that environment. And so we're seeing some improvement there.
I would just add to that in the sense that, again, 18 months ago, we had 30 different markets, probably 3 or 4 different sales types in each market. So you've had like 120 different comp plans, conceivably. And so when you're dealing with, you're not selling owned and operated media at a high margin minus cost of sale, and you're selling products with some sort of fee on top of it at a 30 or 40% margin, what we're seeing is people were getting compensated on gross revenue. And so if you're fighting for a strong operating cash flow and you're paying people on gross revenue when 60 cents on the dollar goes out the door, that's probably not a good equation. So, in addition to watching the margin, making sure that you're compensating the right behavior is pretty critical.
So I'm curious, with so many challenges, where are you finding the most ease of success?
For us right now, it is the digital marketing services area. It's also video, which you may, include it to be part of digital marketing services, but video production, which for us is a core competency as being part of a broadcasting company. So we're getting a lot of requests and trying to grow the size of our clients who are doing video business with us. Working on cause marketing campaigns that may be state funded, that may be nonprofit funded, where they're looking for a platform to really spread a certain message. We've done cause marketing campaigns to prevent domestic violence, to prevent human trafficking, and so that's been a growing segment for us that we continue to focus on, as well as working with different economic development agencies. So there's a lot of smaller towns in North Carolina that are trying to position themselves as places to attract and retain new business, and so they want to get the word out about what's great about their communities. And as a large publisher in this region, we're able to help them with that message and help get it out. So that's an area where we've had a good bit of success. I mentioned OTT and podcasting earlier. While it's still very small, it's still challenging. I do think there's a good bit of opportunity there.
Our online business, .com business, is still the bread and butter of what we do at AMI Digital. But putting that aside, content licensing is something that we've found extreme success in the past 18 months or so. Giving our content, we're a breaking news content production house, so every day we're producing so many articles and allowing different apps or different platforms to license our content from us, monetize either for flat rate or rev share. Is just, again, going back to my previous point, having our content work harder for us, not us working harder. And so we've seen a lot of success there.
Where are you doing that license?
The MSNs of the world, the AOLs of the world, the Smart News, ByteDance. I think there's probably vendors in here that I'm working with. It's dependent on the brand, right, and depending on the month, but there's a plethora of opportunity that we're seeing.
I get all my Howard Stern news from radar.com. It's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, for us, I think the lowest hanging fruit really is sort of in national digital. Having spent a couple years at CNN on my second tour through there post the Trump election, news is a really tough environment, but a lot of the major holding companies see value in news, and there's a drumbeat around saving journalism, et cetera. And so once we overcome that initial hurdle of what's a McClatchy, and we start telling the story about our journalism, our coverage, and how we look at the news, and how, generally speaking, we're fairly non-polarizing, it's a relatively safe environment, that's a message that resonates. Our only challenge there, I think, is scale. And a lot of times, I think we sort of revert to the company that we keep. A lot of the sort of distributed newspaper companies like us have built national sales teams and have had varying success with that. So, ultimately, I would love the green light to figure out how to 5X that group, because I think that is a good and worthwhile story. That's probably easier said than done. I also do think, back to Accelerate, that there is a real opportunity to help people that small businesses, mid-sized businesses that either aren't ready for an agency yet, or don't want an agency, or don't know that they need an agency, and be their partner in onboarding that. And as you look at sort of our pipeline into the back half of the year, that's a pretty strong, already booked business, really strong pipeline in terms of those services, which then gets back to what keeps you up at night, which is, holy shit, how are we going to service all this business? So, there's that balance, and trying to be more predictive and looking at our revenues has been a very transactional business for a really long time. And so to have a pretty good handle on what the next 6 months looks like with a high level of confidence is letting us free up the resource to go support that business, which is good.
Let's give you guys a chance to pick their brains a little bit. Any questions? Over here. And again, remind us who you are and who you're with.
So, Freddie from Newsy. Hi, John. We've emailed for 4 years and never met, so that's cool. Question for Eli. You may have mentioned this earlier and I missed it. You talked about your syndication, and obviously it's about diversification. Every question of mine will be about OTT. How much success have you had in that space, and if so, where are you doing it? And is it owned and operated, or are you distributing?
So we've dabbled in OTT. It's not a major player in our revenue stream right now, although we believe it will be. In terms of what we're doing to grow it, right now we're focusing on other opportunities, but it's always, as many people in this room know, as I'm always up for conversations about every opportunity possible. And really, inspiration for how do we grow a unit is really from a conversation from partners or vendors that we meet here or that come into the office and help us understand. And so for those of you in the OTT space, a bit of education is a great way to start a partnership.
And so just a quick follow-up then. Obviously, revenue matters most to us, right? That's like how we're all paid to be here. But how much would it matter to you if your OTT presence was about discovery that was driving people to revenue rather than revenue itself directly, which is obviously a different matter altogether?
Yeah, we can measure success any way that we want, right? So dollars and cents is obviously the easiest, but audience, potential to drive traffic back, any win that we can put together is obviously something we'll look at. Again, money talks the easiest, but if there's another road, we're definitely willing to explore.
I talked a little bit about my structure. Really, the whole company has sort of really restructured into really 3 functional leadership areas: sales, editorial, and audience. And so I'm intrigued by that because video sort of sat in this little netherworld between all of those functions that now has a true home that's more aligned with revenue as opposed to sort of ambitious initiatives, kind of like Accelerate sat on its own. So while we've done some really, really strong episodic work that's very ambitious, I'm really interested in figuring out, as you'll see sort of McClatchy rebranding itself, not at the behest of the mastheads. The Miami Herald is not going to become McClatchy Herald. It will remain that. But if we can organize under the Miami Herald, or organize underneath McClatchy, one of the conversations I had with our new VP of News is, it'd be killer if we could create, 3 updates, 3 5-minute segments a day that's populated by every region underneath the McClatchy banner, right? Push that to every homepage so it's kind of appointment viewing. If we can get to the point of publishing sort of repeatable news on a wheel that's topical and relevant and not vanilla, but true to who we are, that's where I start seeing an opportunity for OTT. I think we collectively got caught up in, let's take some money from Facebook Watch and do a really interesting one-off. Our podcast, we had a killer podcast around Ray Caruth and him coming out of prison. I got a call from that same team like 2 weeks before it went live, and they were like, so can you sell this? I'm like, how much inventory is it? What's the strategy? What's the marketing plan? Yada, yada, yada. And then what's phase 2, right? Like phase 1 should beget phase 2. We should build a brand here so we can double down on the next one. I was like, no, we're just doing this one. I was like, okay, can't sell it. So getting organized in a way where we can create more sustainable, repeatable revenue is something interesting. And I think if we can crack that with video on sort of a real commitment from editorial, then that's something that can find its way into OTT. And to your point, I don't care necessarily whether that just convinces more consumers that we're more than just a sleepy old newspaper brand and that we can create great video content. And either someone monetizes it on our behalf, we monetize it on traffic that drives through to us, or we have enough scale that we can sell it directly.
We are going to move this to a roundtable discussion that Nick is going to be leading at the end of the morning. Melynda, guys, thanks very much.
Thank you.